Hello, and today I'm going to be talking about a recent project that I've been working on, at least for the last couple of days, which is a website contact form, and I built it from scratch, and there's quite a lot involved. It's not a particularly advanced subject, but there's just quite a lot involved, quite a lot to go through, and I'm quite proud of it because it's certainly tested my basic knowledge with PHP. And there's just a lot of technologies going on here, and there's a lot of styling. So to kind of set the scene here, you guys know I was using a Wufoo form previously for the contact form on my website. Now that was inserting a bunch of bad markup and stuff like that, and it was embedded with an iframe, so it was just inserting loads horrible markup, and for a while I wanted to move to a self-hosted solution, but I couldn't find one that would integrate well with WordPress. So in the last couple of days I was bored and just decided, hey, I'm gonna build one. So that's what I've done. It's pretty custom to this, it can't be reused really, but I'm just gonna go through all the aspects of it and how it's well integrated. So if I just pop open the page here, we can have a look at some of the advanced stuff that's going on. As you can see, it's just a part of my website on the contact page, and it has some fields: name, email, nature, message, and then it has save name and email, and then this nice big rounded send button with a shadow there. If we click submit here, we immediately get some red text pop up. This field is required. This field is required. And that's done by a jQuery plugin that handles it before it even gets submitted to the PHP part, and it basically just does some client-side validation to pop up those nice messages, and it does it via Ajax. So if I type something in there, it rechecks it as you type, and as you see, this field is required on the name bit has gone away, and if you get rid of it, it comes back again. So it checks it via Ajax, and that's all done with JavaScript stuff. Now let's get into a philosophical debate here. A lot of people would argue, and even I would argue, that it's better to do this via PHP because anyone can just disable JavaScript and then they can get past the validation, no problem. But most people have JavaScript enabled and wouldn't bother to turn it off just to get past the validation. And this is basically like a one-liner in jQuery, because I'm using jQuery, using the system that we're going to use, and it's just really good at associating with our markup, and it's all Ajaxy, so it's just the way I chose to do it. So you notice right away that we've got some kind of custom styling here. We've got, when you click in a field, it goes a nice light grey colour. That's basically to give a little user feedback and show that's the active field. Now that's not going to work in IE and neither of the hover effects, because it's using the CSS attributes, and the ones I'm using, they can't be used in IE. I could have done these hovers via jQuery, but that's a little more heavyweight, and I just didn't feel that was necessary. but you could do that if you wanted to. So I'm just going to kind of go through this form here, and you notice it has nice big fields for the text to be nice and big. That's just an aesthetic choice I made. You notice if we enter R into the email field, it knows that that's not a valid email, and it says please enter a valid email address. So it's doing some validation there, and all that's done by just applying a class in the HTML. And then we've got a drop down for nature of message. This is shown in the email just so that I can kind of filter through the emails. And then we've got an option to save name and email, and it saves it for our cookie. Now this isn't quite bit yet, and then we've got just a big nice send button with looks a bit 3D because it's got a bit of a shadow. If we hit send, this part's no longer in WordPress, just how I had to do it. We now get a big nice green text which says your message was sent. So the user gets an idea, and look, there's my email popping in there. So let's take a butcher's, how that styling was grouped. If we look in the markup, if we were to look in the markup, those asterisks which say which field is required are inside of spans, so that span colour red is what is making those things red. And then we've got some and then this label with a class of error, that styling for that is what's making those error labels red. And then we've got one for each element, which is applying some padding, and then we've got things for labels and that span styling, and then we've got a thing which sets the font size, though that just makes it a little bigger and readable. We set the font size for the text area because that's a separate element. We set up a send button which gives us that nice shadow and the rounded corners. We say that on that development when we hover or when it has focus, so when the input has focus, we want to apply a background of a light grey, same for the text area. And then we have this message with class of success which sets font weight to bold and colour of green, and then we just have this styling for the text area as 20 pixels italic, so that's the CSS. Okay, so now I think we should look at how the validation is handled, because we've discussed the validation but we haven't actually took a peek at it. So if as we discussed before, this is handled by JavaScript, and for many reasons that's not very robust, because all the client has to do is turn off JavaScript and get past the validation. However, not many people, especially the types of people, web-savvy people that are going to be coming to my website, are going to have JavaScript off. So, it's not such a big problem. And if you are dumb enough just to turn JavaScript off to get past the validation, then I can do it anyway. But I just don't think there's much of a trade-off to do it with PHP when this is so easy. So at the bottom of our WordPress page template, that's the page that controls this page. This is in WordPress. So if we fire up Coda again, we load. I'm noticing at the bottom of the file where all these script files get loaded, so the file isn't dependent on these files getting loaded because I'm using an external jQuery include from Google, which saves a bit of space on my server and a bit of bandwidth. But as it's using an external service, you can't always rely on it all again. So I'm loading those at the bottom of the file. So if they don't load, at least the rest of the page loads. And let's talk about another reason why I'm doing that. I'd like to just load jQuery from a WordPress server and have it all local. But when I tried to do that, the validation plugin that I'm using just would not work. So it must be something to do with the local version of WordPress. The local version of jQuery in WordPress. I don't know how often it's updated, and I don't know what version it is, but I can only guess that's what the problem is. And then so those two script includes are for loading jQuery from Google. The third one is we get a file from we back up to the root. So I'm keeping myself nice and organised. We go into the JavaScript folder and get the jQuery validate plugin, and then we load our own custom JavaScript. So we'll take a peek at that in a minute, but I'll just talk a little bit first about how this form is structured. We have an ID on it, so it can be targeted with jQuery, and each input just has a class of required, and this works on multiple class and methods. So if you say that input has got a class of required email, and it takes in both of those classes and utilises them, so the plugin knows that it's required and that it's an email field, so it does that email validation and that thing. So a class of required is all that's required on the form. For example, if I take out the class on the name field real quick, and we back up to, we go on refresh here, okay, well maybe it still is required, maybe it didn't save. Just hit save to save those changes. try again to submit that form, and the name field is no longer required. So that's how easy it is to control that validation, and that email class is what tells it that it's an email field. So I'm going to paste back in that class of required because I want that input to be required. But that's all that controls whether it's required or not. So it keeps our markup really clean and our JavaScript really easy to write. I think we should take a butchers now at our JavaScript file, which is stuff.js file. Now this looks a little complex, but it's really not. We get the form with the ID of form-contact and we validate it. This little parameter here means we pass in some options. Now you're supposed to be able to just run the validate function and it will accept all these defaults anyway. But that didn't work for me, so I had to do it this way. What this basically means is when the user clicks submit, after validation is passed, we run the form submit function, which submits to the action URL. Without this, when we click send, it would just validate, but it wouldn't go anywhere. So that's really quite important. Okay, so we've looked at validation, we've looked at CSS, we've looked at markup and just some philosophies. Now I think we should look at the email that it actually sends, because it's a contact form. It's got to actually get to the contact. It's got to send good emails, right? This is quite a basic email, but I feel like it does a pretty good job. And we say what the name is, we say what the email is, and we have some nice bold headings to separate that. That's to create that spacing. That's actually done with two BR tags in between each thing, because you can't really use any CSS when you're sending an email with PHP. So I just had to rely on HTML to create that spacing. On the web, that would be appalling, but as this is an email and no one's actually going to see it, and it matters what I'm only ever going to be viewing it on this email client, so whatever makes it display best on this email client is what is best on the emails all linked up, and we have headings here. Let's look at this. It says the user's email as the from email. It says to me, and it has the same message. And this is my way of kind of making sure it doesn't go in my spam filter. I have an action set up on my emails that anything with, and this is just on my email client. This is nothing to do with the website really. That anything with a subject of message from website doesn't go into my spam and is highlighted in a nice yellow colour. And it has their email as the reply to email. So if I hit reply, you notice that it has their email and to field. Okay, so now let's look at how that email was actually sent. First I want to say, you might have noticed I'm shooting this video in parts, partly because I was forced to, and partly because I just want to try out a new way. So every time we're getting onto a different topic, I'm doing another part. I can't remember if we already covered this, but I don't think I have. Certainly haven't covered it in as much detail as I'd have wanted to, but pardon me for those covered. What we're going to look at now is how it sends the email, and what happens when it gets past the contact-form-handler.php page. This is all a PHP file. There's no HTML in this file. There's bits of HTML in it, but there's no HTML that's outside of PHP tags. And again, I just felt that it would be so much better to kind of link this to a separate file and kind of get it out of WordPress. For several reasons, because then I just felt less restricted. What I tried doing is setting this up at the top of the files so that we could have nice AJAX submissions, but I just don't feel that's relevant, and I feel like this is quite a nice setup, and it gives me the stuff that I need. So when we submit, it goes to the action URL, which is in my theme folder, but to separate things I should probably put it at the root, which is something I'll probably do after this video, because it's not part of my theme and it shouldn't have to drill down all the way to my theme folder to get to this file, but it's just the way things turned out. So we're doing a post. So post those variables to this contact-form.php page. Let me talk about the difference between get and post, because they're the two methods you can use. And as far as what the user's going to get out of it, they're not any different. But get is for getting stuff, and post is for posting stuff. So although a lot of people use it, get's not really meant for contact forms and that. Get, post, the variables that are going to be passed along to this file as a part of the URL in the URL bar. So I just don't think that's very user friendly. So I chose to use post. Then if we go into our contact form file, what most people will do, something like this. To get that variable, we'll do, this is the semantic way to do it anyway, they'll do post_get, and then in square brackets they'll say whatever the name of the field was, 'cause that'll grab it out, and that's whatever's been put in the name attribute. That's not wrong and it'll work, and loads of people use that. The W3C has that in the tutorial, but they also have what I'm using, which is this request variable, and then you just request it. That's neutral between get and post. So for some reason I decided to change whether I'm using get, whether I'm using post, this will still work, and this has no side effects, so I find it better to use this. So we build the email with all those other semantic BR tags I was talking about. We tell it where we want the email to go, and we give it that subject. We start with a blank email, because what we're going to basically do is append things to it. We put the name, we put 2 breaks, and then we put the name that the user entered. We basically do that throughout the file. But then
it's 10:30.
When it comes to the message, the last thing we append to that is before we append it, we use this strip tags function, and what that will do is strip any HTML tags from whatever the user's entering. So I'm making sure I'm getting a clean, secure email. We set up headers, and what this allows us to do is literally have something that's going to be in the header of the email. And we say that one header we want is from. We want to strip tags and say the name. We do this stuff, this main version in this content type is all what allows us to pass line breaks and strong tags and all that sort of stuff to give that HTML its formatting into that variable. So that's absolutely necessary. I just copy and paste those because to be honest, I don't really get what they mean, and I don't need to. It just works right. Then we invoke the PHP mail function, but this is a little weird way to do it. We check if it worked, and what the condition we have is the mail function. So we're not like having to put it into a variable and then check that variable. We're just checking the mail function directly, but the mail function was to still perform when it's inside the if statement, because obviously it has to check it. We pass in whatever said the to variable is, whatever said the subject is, and then we pass in the message with that big variable that we made. And then we pass in the headers, which again allows us to have the HTML. And then if that worked, we say die, which means stop it. But then inside the parameters of this die function, you can put what you want it to say, and I've just, maybe this isn't a nice way to do it, but I've just put an entire page worth of stuff in there, so Echoes is out proper page with all its styling and everything, so that it looks like it should be. So it kills the mail function, and then it outputs this markup, and then it dies, and then that's the end of this PHP file. So where I got all that markup from is so that it all links up. That's from WordPress, but I couldn't have it spit out all the WordPress stuff because there isn't a WordPress file number, so I knew it would have all the paths. So I just viewed source and copied and pasted everything into these parameters, and that works fine. One thing I did do though is disable the search form, because once it's not inside of WordPress, if someone did try to run a search, it would just come up with an error, so I might as well not show that. So that's basically my contact form, which is a pretty simple contact form again, but I've been working on it for a long time, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out. So if you want to use it, you can go to tom-rogers.com/about/contact. One of the there's a couple of modifications you might see when you come here. For the one thing, that contact that success, what the action URL points to, will be will be in the root, so you don't have that path to the theme. And this save name and email will actually work. When it was saved now, it grabs a cookie from the other file, and then if they ask to say the name and email, it gets the name and email, puts it into the cookie, and then sticks that into a variable to see if it's there, and then spit out next time. That's not working yet though. So that was my contact form. Sorry for the kind of bitty PC for this video, and sorry for all the noise. The bit that I recorded this morning, the windows were open, and it was just turning into such a long video that I just wanted to ramble and kind of go for all the stuff, but I wasn't really that bothered about the quality, to be honest. But hopefully you got something from the philosophies. Thanks for watching.